There's an issue everyone encounters when building AI agents. AI agents hold enormous promise. They're going to disrupt every experience we have online. But there's a problem. They're too unpredictable and prone to mistakes. Should we wait until they're perfect? Of course not. But how can we make them safe and dependable right now? It's simple. Keep a human in the loop. Humans guiding AI agents mean fewer mistakes, more accurate results, and bigger possibilities. Welcome to episode 34 of Tool Use, the weekly conversation about AI tools and strategies to empower forward-thinking minds. I'm Mike Bird, along with Ty Fierro, and this week we're joined by Dexter Horthy, founder and CEO of HumanLayer, and the perfect person to help us tackle this challenge. Dex, welcome to Tool Use.
Super stoked to be here hanging out with y'all.
We're super stoked to have you. Well, I'm curious kind of your background and how you got into agents and AI in general. I'm kind of curious to see what you have.
Yeah, great question. I mean, so we got into doing agent dev tools because I was building AI agents myself. We were building a startup at a completely different market. It was like tools for data engineers and very, very competitive market. Smaller TAM than you might think. And so it was really, really important. We had to figure out ways to do really interesting things to stand out. And a lot of the people in our space were doing sort of these recommendation engines. They would inspect what was happening in your data warehouse, how people were using it, and then they would give you a list of recommendations. They would say like, hey, you should add an index here, or hey, here's a table no one's used in 3 months. Maybe you want to get rid of it. If you've ever been in charge of a SQL database, you can imagine more and more things that are like, hey, this isn't quite right. Came to this conclusion that like basically most of those recommendations were just giving developers homework. Just like you look at a big list of CVEs, you're like, oh, thank God they found all my vulnerabilities. But like, now I have to go do something about it. And so we kind of had this idea of like, well, what if we could, this is like April 2024. Like, what if we could build something agentic? What if we could build something that would like do the work for you? And it would, a lot of deterministic code in there as well, but it would look at the stuff and it would make a decision. And I'll get into later, like why LLMs change how that looks. But basically we built this system that was an MVP that would basically, find any SQL table that had not been used in 90 days. And it would go find the person who had created that table or last used it, and it would ping them in a Slack DM. It would say like, hey, you haven't used this in 90 days. We're going to drop it. Simple concept, probably good to get permission. And exemplifies like what this thing that I've like since come to describe is what we call an outer loop agent. So a lot of AI and a lot of AI applications live in these kind of chat GPT style interfaces where like as a human, I open it up, I decide, oh, I'm going to use this app. I'm going to use this agent to do something. I'm going to set up some stuff. And then it's actually really easy to get human in the loop in that case, right? You're typing and then the agent says, hey, cool, I'm going to do this thing. And you're like, yeah, okay, that looks good. Or like, no, don't do that. Don't buy that stock or whatever your fun toy agent is. But there wasn't really a really like established UX for when the human agent interaction is agent initiated, right? Where some event happens or some cron kicks off or there's an outage or whatever it is. And an agent's going to work for 2, 5, 10, 90 minutes. And then it's going to get to some point where it's like, okay, I've decided that it's time to do the critical thing or the scary thing, like drop a table or something. Or it's like, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. Like, I need help from a human of some type. And maybe it knows what kind of human, or maybe it's just a general, like, yeah, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. But anyway, so sort of building this outer loop agent that would go and make decisions, and then it would find a human when it was time to do the thing. And one of the things we found was that even asking someone for permission to do a scary thing was itself a scary thing, because we were talking to our buyer, was the head of data, and this guy would basically, he said, cool, I want to buy your tool, I want to have it clean up all my stuff, but like, I can't just have you sending random Slack messages to all the people on my team, because like my VP of product is writing SQL queries and my CEO is like slinging queries, and I don't want some like app that I bought to go nag my executives and make me look bad being like, oh, you didn't use this table, we're going to drop it. So we're like, okay, that's cool. We'll do 2 steps. So you approve it, you approve the message, and then we'll go over to the analyst and they'll approve it, and then they'll approve it. And then if you both approve, the table will get dropped. And realized also that as like AI agent builders, what we wanted was like, we wanted to ship software that was pretty good and get it in customer hands quickly. We didn't want to spend 6 months building all these evals to make sure it was perfect. We don't want to spend 6 months exploring, fine tuning every single flavor of prompt engineering, et cetera, et cetera. They're like, okay, cool. Well, like we already have the Slack thing set. Like ping us, and we'll approve it, and then it'll go to the head of data, and then it'll go to the stakeholder, and then if all 3 people approve, then we'll drop the table. And around then, I got kind of tired of selling to data teams. I love that industry. I'm like a big data nerd. I've been doing metrics and spreadsheets and graphs and analytics basically my whole career since I was like doing physics in undergrad. But I was like, you know what? I think anybody building AI agents is going to end up hacking together. So, and I talked to a lot of builders, like indie hackers and founders and people at bigger companies. And I found that like lots of people were kind of like kludging stuff like this together themselves. I said, okay, cool. Like, let's see if we can make a platform that can solve this problem generically enough that lots of people can use it. And they can focus more on like getting the prompts right, getting the pipelines right, getting the workflows right, and not worry about like stitching webhooks together across Slack and email and WhatsApp and wherever else they want to talk to their users.
So I love it. I love the idea of you just being able to get quick feedback, iterate on it, but actually build a tool that addresses that very concern. Because one thing that we've done building AI agents is got to keep an eye on it. We both just work at Open Interpreter, and seeing that thing go is super cool until it starts going off the rails, and then just quick Control C,
Like, no, wait.
Yeah, exactly. Was there a specific instance when you're like, this is something that's everyone needed, or is it just through your experimentation, you're like, I need this, so I imagine other people will as well?
I mean, I said, I need this. I'm curious if anyone else needs it. I spent like 3 weeks building a prototype. During that 3 weeks, I went to like every AI meetup I could find. I flew to Seattle twice to hang out with the AI Tinkerers guys. I was in San Francisco, and so I basically built this MVP in like 3 weeks and presented it at I was living in Chicago at the time, and I flew out to SF to present it. And I had like 50 people come up to be like, this is really important to like what we're doing. Like, let's chat. I'd love to play with this. And that was the day where I was like, cool, this is no longer an experiment. Like, this is, I don't know if this is enough pull, but this is way more pull than we had for the other thing.
Interesting. It's such a fascinating building block of agents, because we really do want to build these like collaborative co-pilots where it's not just agents going off and doing everything. There are these big decision points that need human contact. I guess kind of curious from like, I see why you built a human layer, but maybe we can talk a little bit more abstractly why human in the loop as a concept is just so important for this industry, and why this is something that's going to be around for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people go down this path when they're designing agents or just using LLMs to do stuff in general, right? Agents is basically just an LLM plus a for loop plus some structured outputs and a switch statement, and like we can get into that like later, but like you go through this process and you're like, okay, this is pretty good. Okay, this is pretty good. Oh, it gets it right like 80 or 90% of the time. 70 or 80% of the time. That's not quite good enough for like software that I'm going to give to my customers that's going to do interesting things. And so a lot of people end up saying like, cool, well, let's make research agents. And the research agents will save people a lot of time. And it's all read access to data. We'll compile all this stuff and we'll summarize it for you. Maybe we'll even draft the emails. But at the end of the day, like, most production agentic software is outputting things for a human to do with, to do something with.
That was just high level human in the loop. I think it's just super interesting because, I mean, agents just off on their own can go and make mistakes. And some of the models we have right now are really powerful, and they're way more powerful than they were even a month ago or 6 months ago. But they're still not perfect, and they do make these mistakes. And so adding some sort of gate, almost like an if statement almost of like, is user approved or not, before big decisions feels so important, and feels like such an interesting point there. So I'm kind of curious what the niche is you're going for. Is this for standard builders, or is this more for larger teams, or what's this building block most for?
I mean, I think the people... Yeah, so you can have these read-only use cases that, 80, 90% accuracy is okay. Or you look at AI SDRs, like, that's already a numbers game. If we're getting, if our outbound is expecting to convert 10% of the time, and let's say 20%, like, we're only writing good outbound 80% of the time, then we're going from, like, 10% conversion to 8% conversion. Like, not a big deal. It was already a spray and pray. You're already, like, not putting a lot of time into every single one because you want to see who comes back. But things that need 2 nines or 3 nines or 4 nines of reliability, most people try it. They're like, yep, nope, LLMs are not good enough for this. And what I am super interested in is like, how do we help people build agents that can do really big, impressive things? So like one of our customers is a company that builds like AI agents that live in Slack, and they handle DevOps tasks. And like one of the things they're prototyping right now is like AI agents that can like orchestrate Terraform plans. And it's like, I would never ever like the sorts of things that you go to any enterprise in the world and you ask the head of IT, it's like, hey, are LLMs smart enough to like life cycle and create and destroy infrastructure? They'd be like, fuck no, probably never. Not like in a couple of years when they're smarter. Like literally never will I allow an LLM to do this. But suddenly you bring a human in the loop and the LLM says like, hey, here's the plan. And like, but the software it's a mix of LLM and deterministic software, but you basically have guarantees that like the thing I showed you is the thing that's going to run. Suddenly, I've made an app that can go modify my infrastructure. And as long as there's a person online to answer it, or you have kind of an escalation policy set up where it's like, okay, cool, like after 5 minutes, send it to this Slack channel, and then after 10 minutes, email it to this person. And if no one responds in 15 minutes, just close it and failed. And like, we'll try again later. But like those sorts of things, suddenly you're able to build agents that do really interesting, impressive things.
I love it. Production infrastructure, obviously anything with financials makes a lot of sense. Do you have any other use cases that either customers have come up with or that you've just kind of imagined as hypotheticals that will work with human in the loop?
Yeah, there's a couple other ones like, you think about like supply chain, right? So supply chain, there's all these ancient ERP systems and you got to update data in them and stuff like that. But then also like a lot of it happens over email because it's like distributors and suppliers and intermediaries and shippers and all these like people, and none of them all work for the same company. It's all like wrangling all these different orgs. And usually a supply chain disruption, the source of truth for a supply chain disruption is in an email thread somewhere. And so if you can sit in somebody's email inbox and read all their emails, a disruption can cost tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands a day, if not addressed. And so if you can basically read all that data, prioritize it with an LLM, not that hard, a little bit of deterministic code, then you can basically communicate on behalf of the organizing body to all of these different people. You can send an email to the supplier and say like, hey, we need to know how many boxes you have and how big they are so we know what size truck to send or something like that. And I think enterprises are not really ready to trust an LLM to like just be spraying emails out to all of their trusted like partners and stuff. But if they get a notification first, it's like, hey, we saw this escalation. Here's what we're thinking. Here's the email I'm going to send the supplier. You could be like, yes, or like, no, I'm handling it, or like, no, don't try to fix this one. I got it, or like, no, do the email differently. The cool thing about LLMs that is very different, that has not been possible before, is it's no longer like send a user an email with a link in it that pulls them back into a web application. They can literally interact with giant pieces of complex software just by replying to an email. They don't have to leave where they already are.
It's so cool. And admittedly, coming into this conversation, I always viewed human layers like a transitory type of technology. Like until AI agents get good, then we can use this in the meantime. But it really allows a human to work collaboratively with an agent. So the ability to kind of stay in the loop, get your opinion, whatnot, this really unlocks a lot of use cases that don't have an end date. It really allows it to be a collaborator in the workflows.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you think about, like, oh, what if the models get smarter and we don't need human approval anymore? It's like, well, there's things we don't let humans do without human approval. So, like, in a world where this super intelligence is so super intelligent that it's way smarter than all of us, and actually we would, like, that's a different world. I'm not. If you're trying to plan for that world, you're not gonna get it right. So I don't see any reason to plan for that world. So let's plan for the world where, like, even if the models keep getting way, way smarter, people are just going to want them to do bigger and bigger things. They're just like, I think it was someone from Notebook LM said this. It was like, there's this like rule in building on LLMs, which is that like the only way to create really magical experiences on like AI software is when you find a thing that is like right at the boundary of what the model can get right, and you get it right consistently. And that is how you deliver magical AI experiences. And so whether your AI agents are collaborating with your customers and your users and things like that, or they're just like looping in your team where it's like, oh, we get this right 90% of the time, but we want to get that up to 99.9%. So we just hired a bunch of like professional EAs or professional salespeople or whatever it is to review the AI agent. And like, we take the feedback over time and we use it to make the model smarter. We either rag against it, or we can turn it into fine-tuning data or eval sets or whatever it is. Because like problem with human approval is it doesn't scale. Like if I build software and every single customer I serve requires me to have another human on the back end, like clicking through messages in Slack or like labeling data in a table, like that doesn't work. So that's kind of the next frontier that we're going to. Not to skip ahead or anything, but yeah, the ability to deliver great things that LLMs like probably shouldn't be able to do or can't do reliably enough, but just do it anyways.
The consistency thing is so important. I feel like that's what we're all trying to strive for, building agents, is try to get these things better and better at that. I was thinking about while you're saying that of maybe human in the loop doesn't scale, but I'm curious about as AI gets better and it's capable of making better decisions, the value of the lower amount of human in the loops rises, right? Because there's some amount of maybe the one human in the loop is right all the way up to the CEO, and they have to approve this giant amount of work that's done, right? I feel like there's always going to be that one human in the loop that's necessary to approve entire workflows or approve entire things. It's really interesting. I feel like maybe it doesn't scale, but I feel like it will always be a thing and will get weirdly more valuable as it gets bigger. But I don't know. I'm curious about that.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I have this thesis at Human Layers. We're building the company. Like we build a lot of AI agents internally to help us do things faster. We've built CI/CD bots. We've built things to help manage like linear and our task management and our CRM and stuff like this. I used to run customer success teams for like 4 years when I was at Replicated. And I don't really want to hire a customer success team. Like before we hire non-technical people, we're going to hire engineers to build AI automations that scale me as the only salesperson, as the only customer success person. And again, this outer loop agents concept allows for proactivity, right? I don't know if y'all remember, like 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, you'd be working on something, and you'd just be doing it manually, no AI or whatever. And someone came by, my boss came by, our CEO came by, and was just like, oh, what are you working on? I was like, oh, I'm doing this thing and writing this stuff. He's like, why are you not using ChatGPT for that? And it was like, back then, the AI power users weren't even the people who were brilliant prompt engineers. Like the most important thing to be an AI power user was to like remember that you could use AI to do a thing. And so if we invert the control and we build software that is like, I know all the places you can use AI, and I'm going to use AI for you, and we're just going to loop you in the end when it's ready.
When you build these internal AI agents, do you have a favorite agent framework, or do you just freehand it and make it custom?
That's a great question. I've tried pretty much every framework out there. We kind of, as an engineering team, will go through like every week. There's always new frameworks. We have 3 people on the team right now, and we do 3 a week. Everyone does a framework that's part of their like extracurriculars and presents it to the team. There's always really interesting ones. I think some of the newer ones are doing some really cool stuff. I talked to the Monster guys recently. Part of me thinks that like there will be a framework that wins, but there's this other part of me that says like we're still really deep on the abstractions. We're still really fresh on these abstractions, and I'm not quite sure that we have the right ones yet. So when we build, we kind of do everything ourselves. We basically have decomposed this problem into, you have a prompt, and then you have a set of outputs, right? I actually think that like the idea of tool use is, not the podcast name, but the idea of like the agent is using tools, is maybe like a harmful abstraction, especially for engineers who are new to the space, because the way you get the most juice out of today's models is like by prompting them to output the right JSON. And all the tool use is, right, is like, okay, we got the LM to output JSON. we'll call it function calling. That way I'm not talking about the show. All the function calling is like, you told the model, here's the kind of JSON you can output. It outputs JSON. And then you take that JSON and your deterministic code is going to decide what to do with it. You basically have a giant switch statement that is like, cool, based on the name of the thing that model picked or the shape of the JSON, that means that we're going to call this API, or we're going to kick off this pipeline, or we're going to go send an email to this human and wait for a response, whatever it is. And so if you kind of decompose the internals of the framework, you have a prompt that outputs JSON, you have a switch statement that decides what to do with it, and then you have a for loop that is like, keep going and keep telling the agent like, okay, now here's what happened so far. What's the next step? And then, okay, go do that step. And then now here's what happened. And eventually there's some output that is like, okay, now we're done. There's all kinds of control points. I think you guys had Vaibhav from BAML on the show recently. He talks about probes of like, if the LLM is a black box and you can't really easily see inside of it, and you can't really make changes to it easily. I mean, you can put giant fine tuning runs, but it takes a while and it's hard to tell if you even made it better in the first place. The more spots in the workflow that you can create like knobs and dials, the more likely you're going to be able to get to better performance. And I think of like LLM engineering is partially prompt engineering, but I think prompt engineering is part of a bigger category that I call context engineering. Because it's everything. LLM's a stateless function, right? Everything that you put into the LLM is the only thing that affects what the outputs are, and some of the parameters and stuff. But like, you have your prompt, which is like instructions, and there's a whole bunch of stuff you could do there. You have context, which is like, we do some RAG, or you pull some documents or something. You're giving it external information, and then in an agent, you have like what's happened so far, right? That's your context, and like, so you've done all these steps. What's the next step now? You do this step and there's an error. Now what's the next step? Okay, we'll try it again with some other parameters, or we'll try some other approach. And then the last part is like the structured output, like how you tell the model what kinds of things to output. And so you want to be able to tweak and change all of those things, the instructions, the how you tell it. Like, a lot of people use the standard OpenAI messages format, role system, role user, role assistant tool calls, role tool, and like you can use that big JSON. It's like pretty standard across all the APIs. But there's no reason that you can't just have role system and then a user message with a bunch of XML that says, here's all the steps you already did. And like, I don't know which one of those is better, but I know that if you have the ability to tweak and change and try everything, you're much more likely to get to the best performance. And especially with agents, I'm sure people talk about this all the time. Like, the difference between 89% and 91% accuracy is massive, because if you're doing 10 plus steps, every time you go around the loop, the chance that you could get it wrong is like exponentially blows up. And so you want to be able to give yourself the control to do everything that you can to get that agent right. Do I have the time to do that for little toy agents we build for our back office shit? No, of course not. But like, that's kind of the world that we're trying to build for.
That's fascinating. It's really interesting. The idea of the knobs and levers and the key points, I think that's really interesting. And it's kind of I haven't reached for agent frameworks either because of that. And I've tried Crew AI and I've tried some of these other ones, and they're interesting, but it does feel like they're doing too much and that I can't really modify the things that are important. So I've definitely reached to build my own and our own like agent frameworks of sorts. It feels like a good thing. Okay, I'm kind of curious just what your thoughts on MCP are. Is it overhyped? Is it underhyped? I see.
Oh man, I want to ask you about your agent framework, but I'll your home rolled what you actually ended up building. But I can answer that first. I think if you look at the entire AI industrial complex from the right angle, it is a giant race to convince people who haven't heard of tool calling that you invented tool calling. And I think that's like the biggest thing that MCP did is like when OpenAI launched the function calling API, the only people who really could use it well were like the people who had been prompt hacking since GPT-3 and were already like messing with structured outputs, and like the people building the frameworks. Like I think I did a LangChain example in like April 2023. Like ChatGPT had been out for a couple months, and I was like, oh, you could pass this thing like a Swagger spec, like an open API spec, and you can give it an API key, and it can go interact with that API, and it's printing out its thoughts along the way. And it's like, yeah, it was using GPT-3 or 3.5 or whatever, so it wasn't very good, but it was like, this stuff has been around for a very long time, and I only really just fully wrapped my head around it maybe like a year ago, which is when I got pulled into all this stuff in like April or May when we started building our agents. And I think it's a big light bulb moment for anybody who hits it. And so what Anthropic has done really well with MCP is made tool calling very accessible. I think a lot of people who are using MCP don't actually kind of really grok what's happening under the hoods. They still think of it as like tool usage or function calling or whatever it is, when it's really like, yeah, you call a server and it tells you what kind of JSON to output, and then when you output the JSON, you call the server again with that JSON, and then it does a thing for you, right? Or it gives you back some information or something. That said, I think they're gonna win. I don't think it's hype. I think that there is something to be said for like standards that are accessible to everybody. Like, I spent a lot of time in the Kubernetes world, and there were two technologies for Kubernetes packaging. There was this thing called Helm that everyone always likes to complain about, and it used like raw text templating, and it was kind of ugly, and it was really hard to manage and all this stuff. And then there was this thing that Google came up with called Customize with a K. And it was super elegant, very well thought out. There's like a manifesto about it, and like came around around the same time as Helm. And it was like smarter, better, faster, more useful, like actually better for enterprise users, but it just lost because Helm was first, and more people could wrap their heads around Helm because it was text templating, and everyone's done websites or Ansible or like no matter where you came from, everyone's done double curly braces to make one thing into another thing. And I think MCP might have that kind of moment.
Yeah, I was skeptical because MCP first came out, then kind of lulled and came back hard. I do like the idea of having more standardization because even people have been recently showing that you can jailbreak or like maliciously prompt via MCP servers. So if you're just like going on adding them all, people can say, don't only read this file, also like output txt or passwords.txt or something. So having a more standardized format does allow tooling. We had Jason Neen on somewhere recently, and he came up with this tool, MCP-SX, I believe it's called. And it would orchestrate different collections of servers. So you could have buckets. So you could say, oh, for development, I want to activate these ones. For my daily life, I want to activate these ones. So you don't overload the context. And I'd say that's one of the biggest perks of having a standardized thing across the board. And I mean, Sam Altman tweeted out. I think Sundar also did. So I think it's going to be the winner as well. And yeah, it's an abstraction. It just makes things a little bit easier. But I think the tooling that comes from that is going to be massively helpful.
Yeah, once everyone starts to build on top of it, it's over. We're kind of quietly building an agent framework, and it's entirely about MCP and like the challenges of like, hey, if you have thousands of MCP servers and they're a mix of standard IO and SSE and all these different formats, like how do you like run those distributed in the cloud without having to think about like scheduling them, basically?
Staying on top of AI news shouldn't mean endless scrolling. Anetic Daily Intelligence is a free daily report uniquely curated just for you, like a personal assistant updating you on exactly the AI news you need. Every report is unique to each reader and continually adapts based on your feedback, keeping you ahead of the curve on the topics that matter to you. Sign up now at anetic.co.
Okay, I've got another kind of random question for you. I'm searching for hot takes here, but like, what are most people getting wrong about building agents right now?
They're trying to give an agent. I mean, the thing that I think that doesn't work, and I kind of alluded to this before, is like this whole like, here's your prompt, here's your bag of tools, go figure it out. Like, that's the promise of agents. That's what we were promised. Is like, we used to have plain old software 60 years ago. You have if, while, else, whatever. You have all this like control flow. And then someday we had these like more like process-oriented orchestrators, your Airflows, your prefects, your Dagsters, where like, okay, it's the same thing. You have control flow, but there's all these little nodes and they're repeatable and replayable, and like you kind of declare it as a DAG. And the promise of agents was like, stop building the DAG. Just give the LLM the list of edges, and it will figure out the path from like what you have to what your goal is. And I think that works pretty well for like 3 to 10 steps. But where we like kind of pitch this thing I call like micro agents, where there's still value in that, but they become really small encapsulated steps throughout mostly deterministic code. So that's I think the thing that like is so promising, and everyone gets like a basic example working, and then they get it to like 70-80% good, and then they're just like, oh, in order to get this to 90% or 95% or 99%, I kind of have to deconstruct it, and I need to be able to, again, put in these control probes of like, okay, after this cool tool calls, then I actually want to pause and go do something else and come back and then like resume this agent. Or like after this tool calls, I need to go get human input. Or like after this tool responds, I need to pass it through another LLM to like squash it down because it's too much JSON. And like being able to really engineer the thing is really important. And I think if you hand your keys over to the non-deterministic like black boxes for agents, you miss out on that opportunity to really build a system that exactly solves your problem.
Do you think outside of like some smarter models and like some intelligent engineering like that, there are missing pieces before we hit like level 5 autonomy AI agents? Like, are there other technologies people could work on to help accelerate us getting to that goal?
What is level? I mean, I know it's like formally defined, but like, what do you see as the biggest challenge getting there?
So I kind of use level 5 tongue in cheek as the way like self-driving cars. Like level 4, you still got to be aware of what's going on. You never know if there's like bad light in the camera or something. But level 5 is just, it gets it, and it can go anywhere. It can go accomplish the mission without human intervention. Not saying human in the loop still would be valuable for, preferences and whatnot, but just for it to be able to say, hey, I have the confidence that if I give you a task, you can go online, accomplish the goal, and just let me know when you're done.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think for me, it's more like, how do we get value today, and how do we set ourselves up for expanding into a world where LLMs get smarter? So if you can picture like a graphy, daggy kind of workflow with like 100 steps. And you say, okay, these 3 steps we're going to replace with a micro agent. And these 2 steps over here, we're going to replace with like a really small agent. And then eventually, as the models get smarter, maybe those grow and they can handle more and more steps. And so you kind of have yourself set up to get value out of LLMs today with what they're capable of today, and then build in a way. So like, I guess that's my answer is like, how can we make it easy? What frameworks, what tools can we give people to make it easy to start with what LLMs can do, optimize the heck out of them and make them as good at that as possible, and then have clear abstractions to grow out until those are like overlapping, or you have multi-agent systems. And like, I think that's the path to like true AGI is like, how do we just like glue these things together and orchestrate them?
Yeah. So actually, keeping in the realm of future, but kind of pulling it back to human layer, I saw it can be, you can contact people with Slack, email, SMS, Discord, a lot of different methods. What are some of like the future hypothetical ways you think humans would want to be kept in the loop with their AI systems?
Oh man, I did like a POC last week with like voice calls.
Nice.
I think, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think SMS and it depends who you're talking to, right? Like the other things we're exploring is like, maybe the interface is the web, but like for developers to build user-facing there's plenty of tools for LM observability for like, I'm an engineer and I want to see what this thing is doing so I can debug it and see what it's happening and fix it. But like tools so that users can see what an LM is doing, not in a chat interface again, but just like, hey, here's the whole workflow, here's all the steps, hey, here's where we're waiting for approval, and here's the 6 people who need to turn their 6 keys to make this thing happen, and we're 4 of them, and we're waiting on 2 more. And so like, I think it's less about the actual interface and more about the initiation of like who initiated the conversation, and like, is this the like unattended AI. So yeah, I don't know exactly what the right contact channels will be in the future. I will probably still be voice and text and like something that can get to me on my phone or my watch.
Do you see anything with like hardware devices? Because I know, so sorry, a bit more context. When we were doing the O1 project with Open Interpreter, one of the big things was, isn't this an app on your phone? And I get it. Like, apps make a ton of sense. Everyone has a phone, or a lot of people already have a phone, and it's there.
Yeah.
But then you're starting to see more of these wearables come out. So do you see that potentially being something? Like, I know Omi has a little pendant that you can just buzz back. And if you just had a little thing saying, give your yes or no, and just do that through the wearable.
I mean, I love the idea of dedicated hardware just because, like, as a person who mostly grew up without a phone in my pocket, or at least not a very smart one, I think there's a lot to be said for the mental toll it takes of having every single thing in one device. Like, there's a bunch of, like, research on this. There's a book that I read, like, a chapter or 2 of and, like, felt like I got the point and didn't finish it, called, like, The Organized Mind. But they recommend things like having different devices, like literally just have like 3 different computers. And one of them is for like taxes and finance and personal admin stuff. And another one is for like screwing around and having fun. Another one is for your day job. And it's like just having them physically in different places in the house reduces the mental burden on your brain versus sitting at one device in one place to do 50 different kinds of work. And so I think that extends to hardware really nicely. I mean, like, I've never been a hardware person. I think I did one Raspberry Pi project. But the idea of having small dedicated devices where it's shaped differently, it looks different, I interact with it slightly differently, it's got different buttons, whatever it is, like, I love the concept. But it concerns me a little bit from like sustainability, like climate. Are we just like creating tons of hardware that is like, if it could be on my phone, I would feel a little irresponsible by having like 6 little microcomputers to run around my house, just like for things that could just be apps on my phone.
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical of the hardware. I'm excited for it. I love the idea of hardware, and I have an Omi from Nick Shevchenko and everywhere else, but a little skeptical. Hardware's hard, and I'm curious to see how that kind of progresses, but really interesting. I want to go back to a point you said back a little while ago about context engineering rather than prompt engineering. And I asked a question to Vaibhav last time when we interviewed him about like what his tips for prompt engineering are. I'm curious what your tips for context engineering would be, or if you have any really interesting points there.
I mean, I think the core of it is like, free yourself up to do everything. Like, I know there's tons of techniques. I'm not an expert on, like, I've played a little bit with some of these things like, model gaslighting, where you kind of like tell it what its previous responses were to kind of influence its later responses. Or like, I know CrewAI has in the past done some magic where like there are no assistant messages. You're literally like, you send it a user message and then you send it another half completed user message. And it's not giving you completions for the user message. It's giving you or for the assistant message. It's actually giving you the completions for the user message. Yeah, there's all kinds of crazy stuff you could do. So like my advice is a little more meta, which is like, make sure you have the control to try all these things. And like, I think you can pull in libraries, you can do things like DSPY or any of these agent frameworks, and they will get you from a couple sentences about what you want to a banger prompt, to like an incredible prompt that you would have to go to prompt school for months to be able to write a prompt this good or something. And that's great until you have to change it. So that's the meta advice, is like, be able to try everything. And like, I think memory and RAG and prompt engineering and structured outputs and like history context management, like it's all just, how do I get the exact right tokens into the LLM in a token efficient, attention efficient way? And like, I think having it as condensed as possible is really important, right? Even as the models get to million blank context windows, I don't think anyone will disagree that you will always get better results by putting in smaller, more focused context, keeping that history of events as short as possible and letting it kind of like bomb out and finish, or like reset its own context window as often as possible without actually like degrading quality. But there's a balance there too.
Yep, absolutely. And after you do all that, how do you measure it? Do you have evals set up? Do you vibe it? What's your strategy there?
We do mostly like unit testy style stuff. So it's like, we will pull real runtime data from when these agents are running. This is our agent, and here's our structured outputs, and like, here's our big old prompt for our like deployments, like chatbot that runs in Slack. But like, we have these little tests where you can basically run, test. We put in our input context, and we make assertions about what the next action is. And so it's like, hey, you got a Slack message, and it says, hey, do we have anything that needs to be deployed? Okay, let's get commits. That one's not that exciting. Let me go to, here's another one we have where it's like, we can just basically look at real things that happen, pull real context traces, and then if something went wrong, then we can go in and turn it into a unit test. And so here's like a full workflow where we're engineering the context window and we're doing our XML thing. And so basically, rather than having user, assistant tool, we just have one user message with a bunch of like history of what happened. And so I sent this agent an email and I said, yeah, can you make, this thing talks to the Linear API, which is like our task manager. Like, can you make a new issue for Austin to restock the fridges with tasty beers? And it tried to do this and it got an error. And the issue was that, team ID must be a UUID. And so then it pinged a human and it said like, hey, I need more information. It didn't work. And this came as like an email back to me. And then I said, try running list teams. This is a little bit contrived because I know how the agent works on the inside, but then it lists the teams, it gets the IDs, and then it tries again with the right team ID, and then it gets the result where it was successful. And so then we would assert that the next intent is this structured output, which is like, hey, okay, we're done. This is another like hack that we use a lot, which is like, rather than forcing the agent to decide between outputting plain text or outputting JSON, we just ask it to always output JSON. And some of the structured outputs that it can output are like the things that a normal model would do kind of like texty things with. Let me find this. Yeah. So like clarification requests would be, you're talking to ChatGPT and it's like, I actually can't do anything because I need more info from you. That just comes out as text tokens, versus done for now is, again, the same thing, send a message to the user, but now the model is one, it's always outputting JSON, and we have it kind of declare its intent first. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I really like the idea of having the tests right there, quick little asserts, not a whole robust thing. We've explored some much more complicated ways of doing evals, which is cool. You get a lot of tracing, and you can really dig down into it. But when you're looking for functionality, it's good to have those quick iterations. Like, yes, it will accomplish what you want. You don't need to use LM as a judge. Just, is the next tool going to be called?
Yeah, and I think it's nice that a lot of tools will let you get a ton of evals, like standard evals, off the shelf. Like, hey, what's the tone of this? Is it repeating itself? Like basic things that you may want to check. But at the end of the day, like, I'm not building a support chatbot that is just supposed to like sound good and behave well and be semi-professional. I'm building agents that I want to go do interesting things in my infrastructure and like really move things forward. And so I don't know, again, like with everything, it's like, I don't know if we're at the point where like we have the right abstractions where a toolkit can really like solve these things generally. And I think the packaged up stuff is probably only going to be part of the problem. And so we're always very big into like with early tech, like build more of it than you think you need to, so that you have the flexibility and control. And like it's actually really nice timing because it's now way easier to write and maintain code than it was a year ago with all of these like vibe coding things.
One last thing for me, and you kind of touched it at the end here about vibe coding, a little bit different from the AI engineering, but there's a lot of people right now getting into vibe coding and trying to build their own apps and build their own companies, and maybe they're technical or maybe they're not. What advice would you have for budding entrepreneurs or people going out there vibe coding and trying to build tools?
I think it's great that people with ideas can now put them out in the world. I do not know if that will all, like, one of the benefits, I'll get into the actual real benefits. One of the benefits is that guy that you meet, I forget who tweeted this, but it was something like the guy that you meet at every like family outing who wants to tell you about his startup and how great it is, and he just needs an engineer to build it for him. Is like, well, now that guy can go and actually find out if it's good or not, instead of just like complaining that he can't find anyone to build this thing. I have spent a little bit of time as a product manager and like studied a lot of product management stuff, and the idea of like quick prototyping I think is super interesting. And like I think Amjad was on Lenny's podcast talking about the Replit agent and stuff. And he's like, the thing that people love this for, and maybe it's because he was on a product management podcast, but it's like the thing that this is really good for is like PMs can go like spec up and mock up an app and then show it to users. It's like you used to sell startups with Figma. You've heard like, oh, we just sold that we sold that contract with Figma diagrams. We didn't even build it yet. We just wanted to find out if something people wanted. And then once they paid us, then we went and built it. And like that's generally like one of the good ways to build products. There are other ways, there's the Rick Rubin style. Like I have really good taste and like we're just going to build what I want. I think one of the things he also said is like PMs are using this to prototype stuff, but then once the prototype is like confirmed, then it goes to engineers to go make it like production grade and ready. So I think that the like concepts of like building and deploying good software, it's going to get easier, and you have platforms like Vercel and stuff like that make it really easy to like ship things and make them production ready. But at the end of the day, I think of vibe coding more as a like prototyping and like bootstrapping tool. Like I have a buddy I work with who's a designer, and usually like I'll vibe code a bunch of changes to the website and I'll be like, cool, it's ready for you. And he doesn't have to do like JavaScript or business layer stuff. He could just go in and make it look like nice and give it a little bit of character. We're having that bootstrap moment again with like vibe coding plus ShadCN, where every website looks the same.
It's great. And last one for me. If there could be any AI agent in the world today, what do you wish existed that doesn't currently?
Maybe people have done this. I haven't seen a good one. I want a thing that sits in all my inboxes and drafts replies for me. And like, I am pretty like intentional about how I communicate over email, and especially like email and LinkedIn and things like that. And I feel like just by like looking at my history, a model could get pretty good, like pretty close to what I'm doing. And I haven't seen this. No one's given me this. I haven't seen a demo of anything like this, which is just like, get all my stuff, like be my EA or my chief of staff, basically. I think we keep trying to get models to do all these like complex, like really technically difficult things, like write code and analyze data and do math. And it's like, today they're really fucking good at moving information around and keeping like gathering context and keeping everybody on the same page. And like, I think that's the killer app that works today. And like, yeah, all the super intelligence people and the like, we're going to make an AI that builds its own AI that's 10x smarter or whatever. Like, I get why that's the direction that people are going in, but I'm just like, I like writing code. I don't like spending all day talking to people on Superhuman, like sending emails and stuff. So I don't know. That's my agent. I want a chief of staff that knows everything and does the tedious stuff, so I can go back to doing the fun stuff and creating and building and making.
And that's what it's all about, getting the tedious stuff taken care of. Dex, this was a blast. Really appreciate having you on. Before I let you go, is there anything you want the audience to know?
We are launching I probably shouldn't call it a manifesto, but it might read like that a little bit. Everything we've learned in a year of building AI agents. It's called 12-factor agents. If you're familiar with the Heroku days, there was a thing called 12-factor apps. we're really excited to share that with the community and get feedback and build and iterate on that. So keep an eye out for if you it's on GitHub under the human layer org. It's called 12 Factor Agents. Go check it out.
Nice. We'll link it down below. I'm pumped to read it.
Awesome. Guys, this is super fun. Thank you so much.
Super fun. We'll talk to you next time, Dex.
Catch you later.